Hey everyone, welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be taking a look at Mexican cartels, specifically the Sinaloa and Jalisco cartels,
Okay.
and how they've had such a huge impact on the drug scene here in the U.S.
Yeah.
Our main source for this deep dive is going to be the 2024 National Drug Threat Assessment, straight from the DEA.
Oh, wow.
It's packed with intel. By the end of this deep dive, you'll have a much better understanding of how these cartels operate, the drugs they traffic, their global reach is unbelievable, and even how they're using social media. Plus,
Okay.
we'll also be covering how the DEA is fighting back and what it all means for you.
It's crazy how these cartels can be based in Mexico and yet have such a huge impact on communities thousands of miles away. You know, it's not just a border issue. This is a national, even global challenge.
It really hits home when you see how connected everything is. Okay, so let's get started by taking a look at these two cartels. What can you tell us about their structure and just how ruthless they are?
Well, both the Sinaloa and Jalisco cartels are known for being absolutely ruthless and for their highly organized structures, but they have very different ways of going about it.
What?
The Sinaloa cartel is one of the oldest and most violent cartels, operating like a massive umbrella organization with four main groups under it.
So like a cartel within a cartel.
You could think of it that way.
Yeah.
They share resources, things like smuggling routes and connections, but each one maintains their own leadership and their own ways of making money.
So who are the major players in this cartel of cartels?
Well, you've got Los Chapicos, El Chapo's sons, who are trying to take over their father's empire. Then there's Ismael El Mayo, Zambada Garcia, who's been a major player for decades, and Aureliano El Guano, Guzman Loera, El Chapo's brother. And we can't forget Rafael Caro Quintero, one of the founders of the Guadalajara cartel, which was actually a predecessor to the Sinaloa cartel. He was captured recently after being on the run for a long time. And now Los Chapitos are fighting his faction for control of some prime smuggling routes, particularly in the Sonora Desert, which is a key pathway to the Arizona border.
It sounds like a power struggle straight out of a movie.
Yeah.
With all this infighting, do you think this umbrella model can even hold up?
That's a great question, and the DEA report seems to think that there are cracks in the foundation. The Jalisco cartel, or CJNG as it's often called, takes a totally different approach. They've adopted a franchise model, led by the notorious Ruben El Mencho Oseguera Cervantes.
A franchise model, like a fast food chain but for drugs.
Well, it's not exactly like a fast food chain,
Yeah.
but yeah, each franchise has its own area of expertise, and they tailor their operations to local demand, as long as they stick to the overall CJNG playbook. It's a system that allows for quick expansion and a lot of flexibility.
That's incredible and incredibly scary how they've managed to make it so efficient. But even franchises have their issues, right?
You're right. The DEA report points out a possible weakness in this structure. These franchises could start forming their own alliances that could actually lead to conflicts with other parts of the cartel, raising questions about El Mencho's control and whether internal conflicts will arise.
So both cartels, while powerful, have their internal struggles.
Let's move on to the product. What kind of drugs are these cartels trafficking, and just how dangerous are they? The DEA report is very clear. The most significant drug threat we face is fentanyl. It's fueling the deadliest drug crisis in U.S. history. Just in the first half of 2023 alone, fentanyl was responsible for the deaths of nearly 38,000 Americans. What's even more alarming is that these cartels are intentionally pressing fentanyl into pills that are designed to look like legitimate prescription medications.
So someone might think they're getting an OxyContin or Xanax, but they're actually getting a potentially lethal dose of fentanyl.
That's wrong.
That's terrifying. And the DEA report highlights that. A staggering 7 out of every 10 counterfeit pills seized contain a lethal dose of fentanyl. It's almost like playing Russian roulette with your life.
It is a truly horrifying statistic. And fentanyl isn't the only danger. Methamphetamine, another synthetic drug, is a close second when it comes to overdose deaths.
So it seems like synthetic drugs are the weapon of choice
Yeah.
for these cartels. Why do you think that is?
The report explains that. It all comes down to profitability. Unlike plant-based drugs, like heroin or cocaine, synthetics don't rely on crops or weather. They can be produced anywhere, at any time, as long as you have the chemicals and the know-how. And guess what? The cartels have both, in abundance.
So it's like they're running these death factories.
Yeah.
The report mentions that, and they're getting precursor chemicals from China and setting up these clandestine labs in the mountains of Mexico, pumping out massive amounts of fentanyl and meth.
It's a well-oiled machine, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And while fentanyl and meth are the main culprits, these cartels are still dealing in cocaine and heroin and are always adapting to new trends.
Speaking of new trends, the DEA report talks about xylazine, or Trank, as it's known on the street. It's a veterinary tranquilizer that's being mixed with fentanyl, making it even more deadly. And harder to reverse with naloxone. They even issued a public safety alert about it.
Wow.
And then there's this rainbow fentanyl. It's the same deadly drug, but in different colors.
Yeah.
Presumably to appeal to a wider range of users.
Right. It's all about market expansion. These cartels are essentially businesses, albeit criminal ones, and they're always looking for ways to maximize profits.
It's chilling to think about how calculated it all is. So we've established that these cartels are powerful and well organized with a stranglehold on the drug, synthetic drug trade. That's fueling this devastating drug crisis. But this isn't just a Mexican problem, is it?
No, it is not. The report really highlights the global reach of these cartels. Their impact goes far beyond the borders of Mexico and the U.S.
You're right. These cartels operate these complex networks that stretch across continents. They get precursor chemicals from China. They move drugs through Central and South America. And they've even established footholds in Europe, Africa, Asia, and Oceania.
They're everywhere.
Okay, so they're global players. But how does that affect us here in the U.S.? How are they getting their drugs into our communities?
They use a multi-pronged approach. They have control over key maritime ports in Mexico, which allows them to import massive amounts of precursor chemicals and ship drugs worldwide. Then they use a combination of smuggling routes, land routes, tunnels, even commercial flights to get their product across the U.S. border.
It's mind-boggling how much they control. And the report mentions this concept of piso, which I found really interesting. Can you explain what that is?
Pisa essentially means floor in Spanish, but in this context, it refers to a tax or fee that the cartels charge other trafficking groups to use their territory, while they may not control specific border crossings. They control the surrounding areas, forcing smaller groups to pay a piso to move their drugs through.
So they're basically taxing other criminals.
You got it. Making money on every level of the drug trade.
It's incredible how they've managed to insert themselves into every aspect of this business. The report also mentions how social media has become a major tool for the cartels. Can you tell us more about that?
Social media has become their direct line to customers in the U.S. Platforms like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, and even encrypted messaging apps are being used to sell drugs, recruit members, and intimidate rivals.
It's incredibly concerning how they've managed to exploit these platforms.
The DEA actually ran an operation called Operation Last Mile that revealed just how widespread this problem is. They tracked down cartel-connected distribution networks operating all over the U.S., and social media was a key part of their operation. In fact, the operation resulted in over 3,300 arrests, and they seized 44 million fentanyl pills, tons of meth, firearms, and over $100 million in cash.
Wow.
A huge number of these cases involve social media.
And what's really alarming is how they're using social media to target young people.
Exactly.
They're creating these fake pills that look like Adderall or MDMA. They're using emojis and codes to disguise drug deals, and even using rideshare apps for deliveries. It's frightening how accessible they've made these drugs, especially to young people who might not even realize they're taking fentanyl.
It's like a cat and mouse game, and the cartels are constantly evolving their tactics to stay one step ahead. They're using social media to create a sense of community, glamorize the lifestyle, and offer a way out for vulnerable youth. It's a devastating reality.
So we've talked about how these cartels are structured, their global networks, their reach into the U.S., and how they're exploiting social media to expand their market. But there's another crucial piece to this puzzle: money laundering. How are these cartels cleaning the billions of dollars they make from this illicit trade?
That's a great question, and a DEA report goes into detail about the complex methods that these cartels use to launder money, making it appear as though it came from legitimate sources.
So they're taking their dirty money and washing it clean.
Exactly, and they're becoming increasingly sophisticated in their approach.
The report highlights the rise of Chinese underground banking systems, or CUBS, which the cartels are using to move money between China, Mexico, and the U.S.
Without detection.
Can you explain how these CUBS work? It sounds pretty complex.
It is pretty intricate. But essentially, it involves individuals and businesses in China who want to move money out of the country, bypassing capital flight restrictions. They connect with brokers who then use the cartel's dirty cash to facilitate these transfers, taking a cut for themselves in the process.
So it's like the cartels are providing a service to these Chinese individuals and businesses, helping them move their money while simultaneously cleaning their own dirty cash. It's a win-win for everyone involved, except, of course, for the countless lives destroyed by the cartel's action.
Precisely. And CUBS are just one tool in their arsenal. The report mentions trade-based money laundering, where they buy and sell goods to mask the source of funds, and mirror transfers, which involve coordinating payments between brokers in different countries to make them look like legitimate transactions.
And of course, we can't forget about cryptocurrency. With its anonymous nature, it seems like the perfect tool for money laundering.
Absolutely. The report details how cartels are using cryptocurrency exchanges to convert cash into digital assets, which can then be easily moved across borders and cashed out. It's like a digital version of stuffing suitcases with cash, but much harder to track and seize.
It sounds like a nightmare for law enforcement agencies trying to follow the money trail.
It can be.
So we've painted a pretty grim picture here. These cartels are powerful, well-funded, and tech-savvy. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by the scope of this problem. But the good news is the DEA isn't sitting idly by. They're fighting back on multiple fronts.
Yeah, that's right.
What are some of the key strategies they're using to take down these cartels?
Well, they're taking a multifaceted approach, combining traditional law enforcement tactics with cutting-edge technology and international cooperation.
So it's not just about catching the bad guys. It's about addressing the root causes of this crisis and building a stronger, more resilient society. That's encouraging to see that. They're taking such a comprehensive approach, recognizing that it's not just about arresting people, but also about addressing the root causes of this crisis. But it's not just a job for law enforcement. What can everyday citizens do to protect themselves and their communities from this threat?
That's a great question. And the answer is simple. Knowledge is power. The more you understand about these cartels, their tactics, the dangers they pose, the better equipped you are to protect yourself and your loved ones.
The DEA report specifically mentioned the importance of talking to your kids about the dangers of fentanyl, especially those colorful counterfeit pills that might look like candy or something they see their friends taking. And it's crucial to be aware of what your kids are doing online. The cartels are using social media to recruit young people. And it's vital to monitor their activity and look for any signs of trouble.
And if you see something, say something. If you notice any suspicious activity in your neighborhood, or if you suspect someone might be involved in drug trafficking, report it to the authorities. Even a small piece of information could help law enforcement build a case and disrupt these criminal networks.
So it's a team effort. We all have a role to play in combating this crisis.
We do.
This is just the beginning of our deep dive. In our next segment, we'll delve deeper into how the cartels are adapting to these law enforcement efforts and explore the innovative tactics the DEA is using to dismantle their financial infrastructure. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Postel. Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of Mexican cartels.
Before the break, we were discussing the DEA's efforts to combat the Sinaloa and Jalisco cartels.
Right.
But these cartels are incredibly adaptable. They're constantly finding new ways to smuggle drugs, launder money, and recruit members.
It's true.
It's like a never-ending game of whack-a-mole.
True.
So how are the cartels changing their tactics to stay ahead of the DEA?
Well, for one thing, they're moving away from those large shipments and relying more on smaller, harder-to-detect packages. The DEA report mentions that. They're getting really creative with their concealment methods, hiding drugs in things like tires, gas tanks, even inside the natural voids of vehicles.
Wow, that's some serious ingenuity. Sounds like they're thinking outside the box. Or should I say inside the tire?
Exactly. They're also embracing technology, but not always in the ways you might expect. While they're certainly using social media, they're also using drones to airdrop drugs into the U.S. And even employing catapults.
Catapults. Seriously, it's a bizarre mix of ancient technology and modern-day drug trafficking. It's like something out of a movie.
It is a bit surreal, isn't it? They're adapting to increased surveillance at traditional entry points by finding new, unconventional ways to get their product across the border. But this innovation comes at a human cost.
The report mentioned how the cartels are exploiting vulnerable individuals, coercing them into acting as drug mules, often putting them in incredibly dangerous situations.
It's true. It's a tragic consequence of their ruthless pursuit of profit. They have no regard for human life, whether it's their rivals, innocent bystanders, or the people they exploit to move their drugs.
It's heartbreaking to think about the desperation that drives people to become involved in something so dangerous. And speaking of disregard for human life, the report also delves into the cartel's involvement in other criminal activities beyond just drugs.
You're right. They've diversified their criminal enterprises to include human trafficking, arms smuggling, extortion, and even fuel theft.
Fuel theft. I'm picturing someone siphoning gas from a car.
It's a bit more sophisticated than that. They're tapping into pipelines, stealing vast quantities of fuel to sell on the black market. It's essentially a parallel illegal oil industry run by these cartels.
It's amazing, in a terrifying way, how far their reach extends. It seems like their tentacles of corruption touch every aspect of society, and they're not afraid to use violence to maintain their power and control.
That's right.
The DEA report highlights a concerning trend, the increasing use of firearms by cartel-linked groups. In the U.S., they're arming themselves with everything from handguns to machine guns and even ghost guns, those untraceable firearms that could be assembled from kits.
It's a scary thought.
It's like they're preparing for war. And the report mentioned a particularly disturbing development, the growing use of machine gun conversion devices. These devices can turn a semi-automatic weapon into a fully automatic one, putting a lot more firepower on the streets.
The DEA has observed a direct link between this increased firepower and drug-related violence. They're using these weapons to protect their territory, intimidate rivals, and even carry out targeted assassinations.
It paints a chilling picture of the level of violence associated with this trade. So we've got these incredibly powerful cartels constantly innovating and evolving their strategies, flooding our communities with drugs, and fueling violence. It seems like an overwhelming problem.
It is a formidable challenge. However, the DEA and its partners are fighting back on multiple fronts. They're combining enforcement efforts with intelligence gathering, community outreach, and international cooperation.
So it's not just about catching the bad guys.
No.
It's about addressing the root causes of this crisis and building a stronger, more resilient society.
Exactly.
That brings us to the individual listener. What can we as everyday citizens do to protect ourselves and our communities from the threat posed by these cartels?
That's a great question, and the answer is pretty simple. Awareness is absolutely crucial. The DEA's One Pill Can Kill campaign is a great starting point. Talk to your children, friends, and family about the dangers of fentanyl, especially counterfeit pills. Emphasize that any pill obtained outside of a legitimate pharmacy could be laced with this deadly substance.
That's such an important point. The DEA report highlighted how cartels are targeting young people with fake pills designed to look like Adderall or MDMA, preying on those who might not even realize they're taking fentanyl. It's a sinister tactic, and we need to be vigilant. Be aware of what your children are doing online. Monitor their social media activity, and watch for any suspicious interactions or content.
The report also mentioned how cartels are using social media to recruit young people, glamorizing the lifestyle and offering easy money and a sense of belonging. It's a powerful lure for vulnerable youth who might be struggling or looking for a way out. We need to have open and honest conversations with young people about the dangers of drug use and the allure of these criminal organizations.
But it's not just about protecting our children.
Right.
We can all play a role in combating this crisis.
Absolutely.
If you see something suspicious in your neighborhood, or if you suspect someone might be involved in drug trafficking, report it to the authorities.
The DEA relies heavily on tips from the public to help them build cases and disrupt these criminal networks. Even seemingly insignificant information could be a valuable piece of the puzzle.
So we need to be vigilant, both online and in our communities.
Yes.
But awareness is only the first step. What else can we do to make a difference?
Support organizations that are working on the front lines of this crisis. There are many groups dedicated to providing treatment and support for those struggling with addiction, as well as organizations working to prevent drug use and raise awareness about the dangers of these substances.
That's a great point. We can all do our part by volunteering, donating, or simply spreading the word about these organizations and the vital work they do. But let's face it, the DEA has a tough job ahead of them. How are they keeping up with these constantly evolving threats?
Well, they're constantly adapting their strategies and investing in new technologies to stay ahead of the curve. In our next segment, we'll delve deeper into the DEA's response, exploring the innovative tactics they're using to dismantle the cartel's financial infrastructure and bring these criminals to justice.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about how these cartels are adapting their strategies to stay ahead of law enforcement. Now let's dive into how the DEA is hitting back by targeting the cartel's financial operations.
Yeah, it's not just about seizing cash at the border anymore.
Right.
The DEA is using a much more sophisticated approach, targeting the complex web of transactions that allows these cartels to launder billions of dollars.
The report mentioned something called the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, or FinCEN.
Right.
What role do they play in this fight?
FinCEN is a bureau within the U.S. Department of the Treasury, and they're really the main players when it comes to fighting money laundering. They collect and analyze financial data from all sorts of sources, looking for patterns that might point to criminal activity.
So they're like financial detectives,
Yes,
piecing together clues to track down dirty money.
that's a great way to put it. They're the ones who can connect the dots, tracing the flow of money through shell companies,
Mm.
offshore accounts, and intricate investment schemes
Okay, and how do the DEA and FinCEN work together?
to take down these cartels. Well, the DEA brings to the table the intelligence they gather through their investigations, information about suspected money launderers, shell companies, and bank accounts. FinCEN then uses this intel to track the money and find weak spots in the cartel's financial networks.
So it's like a 1-2 punch. The DEA provides the intel, and FinCEN uses their financial expertise to follow the money.
Exactly, and it's been a very effective strategy. The report mentions that. The DEA and FinCEN have worked together to dismantle several major money laundering operations connected to the cartels. They've seized millions of dollars in assets and disrupted the cartel's ability to finance their criminal activities.
That's great to hear. But we know these cartels operate globally. How is the DEA working with international partners to combat these financial networks?
International cooperation is absolutely key in this fight. The DEA works closely with law enforcement agencies in Mexico, China, Colombia, and other countries, sharing intelligence and coordinating operations to target money laundering.
So it's a global team effort.
Absolutely. The report mentions that. The DEA has agents all over the world, building relationships with their counterparts in other countries. It's a global network, fighting a global threat.
That makes sense. But these cartels are incredibly resourceful. They're always finding new ways to launder their money. How is the DEA staying ahead of the curve?
They're constantly adapting their strategies and using cutting-edge technology to track the flow of money and uncover new laundering techniques, for example. The report mentions that the DEA is using data analytics to find patterns in financial transactions that might indicate money laundering. They're also using artificial intelligence to sift through mountains of data, flagging suspicious activity for further investigation.
So they're using big data and AI to outsmart the criminals. It's like a high-tech game of cat and mouse.
Exactly. The DEA is bringing the latest tools to this fight. But it's not just about technology. There's still a human element to this work.
Can you elaborate on that?
The DEA relies heavily on undercover agents and informants to infiltrate these criminal networks and gather information about their money laundering operations. The report mentions a case where undercover agents posed as money launderers, offering their services to a cartel-connected group. They gained the group's trust and gathered evidence. That led to the dismantling of a major money laundering operation.
That sounds incredibly risky.
It is dangerous work, but it's essential to disrupt these networks from the inside.
Okay, so we've seen how. The DEA is targeting the cartel's money laundering operations through financial intelligence, international cooperation, technology, and good old-fashioned undercover work. It's a complex approach, but it sounds like it's working.
It is yielding results. But the fight is far from over. The cartels are constantly adapting, finding new ways to move their money, and stay ahead of law enforcement. The DEA needs to be just as adaptable, constantly evolving their strategies, and investing in new technologies to stay one step ahead.
It's a constant battle, for sure. But let's bring it back to the listener. How does the DEA's fight against the cartel's financial networks impact our lives?
Well, it's about safety and security. By disrupting the cartel's ability to launder money, the DEA is making our communities safer. They're taking resources away from these criminal organizations, making it harder for them to operate and cause harm.
It's like cutting off the head of the snake. If they can't finance their operations, they can't function.
Exactly. And it's not just about safety. By targeting the financial networks that support drug trafficking, the DEA is also addressing the root causes of the opioid crisis.
Right. These cartels are profiting from the addiction and suffering of millions of Americans. By hitting them where it hurts, their wallets. The DEA is making a real impact on this crisis.
And it's not just about the opioid crisis. The cartel's money laundering activities are linked to a whole range of criminal enterprises, including human trafficking, arms smuggling, and corruption.
So by going after their money, the DEA is actually tackling a much broader range of criminal activities.
Absolutely, it's a ripple effect. By disrupting the flow of money, the DEA is having a positive impact on a global scale.
So what can we do to support these efforts?
As we've discussed, awareness is key. The more we understand about the Lycos, the cartel's money laundering activities, the better equipped we are to report suspicious activity and support law enforcement
We
efforts.
need to be vigilant, both online and offline. Watch out for scams, be cautious about who you do business with, and report any suspicious financial activity to the authorities.
And remember, this is a fight we can win. By working together, we can disrupt the cartel's financial networks, hold them accountable for their crimes, and create a safer and more just world.
That's a great note to end on. This has been a fascinating and, at times, unsettling deep dive into the world of the Sinaloa and Jalisco cartels. We've covered their origins, their structure, their global reach, their impact on the U.S., and the DEA's efforts to combat their influence. But the conversation doesn't end here. We encourage you to keep learning, stay informed, and be part of the solution. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious.